resolutions. Please keep an eye out for an email in the next few days regarding the resolutions and our amendment process. Amendments will need to be pre-filed by Sunday, January 10th, and be added to our meeting agenda. Our first speaker this evening is Senator Adam Ebbin, who will provide a General Assembly outlook. Adam is a longtime ADC member, and since 2012, he has represented the 30th Senate District, which includes a large portion of the city of Alexandria. Adam serves as a member of the Commerce and Labor, Finance and Appropriations, Transportation, General Laws and Technology, and Privileges and Elections Committee. So welcome, Senator Ebbin.
Thank you. Thanks, Clarence, and thanks for all you're doing to keep our party running smoothly during this pandemic. And I also want to give a shout out to Ricardo, who's made this production so smooth and professional. But I did want to talk about the 2021 General Assembly session. And it's a strange one with COVID. The House of Delegates, as met during the special session this past summer, they're meeting virtually. The Senate is planning on meeting in person at the Science Museum. And I'm hoping that we'll be taking even more safety precautions. Sadly, we lost a colleague, Senator Ben Chafin, to COVID just a few days ago, which was a big loss to not just to his region, but to the Senate as a whole. I've told people that Senator Chafin, even though we would disagree on some pretty ideological issues, when he spoke, he always spoke passionately and intelligently and authoritatively to the point where you would really listen and understand his point of view, even if you might not end up voting with him all times. In the end, you could certainly understand the Commonwealth as a whole better because of Ben Chafin. So this coming session is scheduled to be our shorter session. The Constitution calls for it to be 30 days with the possibility of being extended by a 2/3 vote, which is what's happened since the 1970s. But our Republican colleagues say that they do not want to extend because of a special session that we held this summer on criminal justice reform and COVID. But there's still a lot of policy areas to be addressed. And there's also the possibility the governor can call a special session if 30 days proves not to be long enough. We'll be working on the second year of our 2-year budget and making decisions about new federal aid dollars received. We'll be talking about education. The pandemic has highlighted inequities in the education system even more than previously, both regionally and demographically. In terms of housing, I'll have a bill to protect people from illegal evictions, and we want to take proactive steps to create affordable housing. The governor has allocated a significant amount in his budget for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I'll be introducing legislation to legalize marijuana, which will be complicated. We want to create a regulated adult use market for cannabis while still keeping it away from children. And while we do that, we want to provide some equity in our license structure and otherwise, and with the proceeds from dedicated revenue for communities that have been hurt from the war on drugs. So there's a lot to that. And I went to a medical dispensary just last week in Manassas to see how they're faring right now. We may be having some additional criminal justice reform measures that were not resolved during the marathon special session this summer and fall. In terms of elections law, we're likely to codify actions that we took through the budget during the special session and that increase access to the ballot box, things like drop boxes and what's called ballot curing. This will be a year that will consider constitutional amendments, which is a 2-year process to adopt a constitutional amendment in Virginia. It has to be passed by the General Assembly once before an election. And then the following year after the election, at least for the House of Delegates, they can be reconsidered. And if they pass again through the General Assembly, they then go to the voters. And we'll see legislation to remove Virginia's inoperable language restricting marriages to just a man and a woman. And instead, I intend to put in legislation that would make it clear that adults have the right to marry people of same gender or opposite gender. And we'll also see legislation to allow for the automatic reenfranchisement of felons. We'll deal with local issues. In Alexandria, we have an issue of flooding, and I'm going to be putting in legislation to making it more flexible for the city to use their flooding funding to help private homeowners. We'll also see other election legislation like the National Popular Vote Compact they'll be carrying again. And we will see legislation on data privacy, cleaner cars, all kinds of things. So it's likely to be a frenetic session focused on a lot of core government services and critical policy decisions. And we need to continue on the trajectory of progressive change that we've enjoyed this year. In order to do that, we'll need to hold the House of Delegates and our statewide offices. And I know you're going to hear from some candidates for statewide office. So that is my preview. And I don't know if you had any questions for me, Clarence, before I turn over to our next guest.
Sure, Senator Evans. Thanks again for joining us tonight. Insight, based on what you know about